Welcome to episode 106 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is your host, Jamie Benning, talking to you as usual from my house here in London in the UK. The Tories are out, Labour are in, and there's some optimism in the air and also a lot of rain falling from the sky. You can probably hear it actually from where I'm sitting here in my loft. Yes, it's British summertime, it's early July, and we've already had twice as much rain as you might expect in July. But at least the trees that I can see from my window here and the grass are looking full and lush and green. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Welcome to any new listeners that have found the podcast recently, and welcome back to all of you lovely regular listeners. Huge thanks also to all of you that support the podcast via patreon.com/Jamie Benning. By the way, I've just added a new exclusive t-shirt design to the Filmumentaries T-Meal store. You can find that on my link tree. If you go on my Instagram or Twitter, you'll see that on there if you go to the website. So if you'd like to support the podcast, but not via Patreon, maybe by buying yourself a great E.T. Be Good t-shirt designed by my friend Pete Starling, then check it out, please. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to mention about a little social media moment I had last week. So in an attempt to try and grow my audience, I decided to post a few reels on Instagram, snippets of my chats with these incredible artists over the last few years. And I realised one morning that it was the anniversary of John Carpenter's The Thing. 42 years ago it was released, so I thought, I have a great story about that from VFX guru Peter Curran, talking about how he made the title sequence for the movie using some paint, a fish tank, some smoke, a garbage bag and some matches. So I quickly put together a video about it and posted it, and a few hours later I checked back on Instagram, and amazingly it had over 25,000 views. I think one time when I interviewed Fred North I got 53,000 views, because Fred has, a huge following. Then over the next week with this Peter Curran video, went over 50k, up to 100k, then to 500k, and it really was taking off. I had thousands of comments, thousands of likes, and it currently stands at over 2 million views. So properly viral. Not only did this lead to a lot of interaction with people commenting about Pete's genius, it also led to 5,000 or more new followers on Instagram and a small spike in listeners of the podcast. It was small, but it was a spike. I think, people watch these short videos, they last 30 seconds, probably not going to lead them straight to the podcast to listen to an interview for an hour, but, it's all good. Anyway, I got in touch with Peter when it was nearly 1 million views, and we had a nice chat. And shortly afterwards, he got back to me saying he had an idea. And his idea was to remake the title sequence using the same methods he'd chosen 42 years ago. There was a group of people that tried to recreate it, and that was posted on YouTube some time ago, but Peter tells me they got some of it wrong. So another week goes by, and Peter has just posted a preview of his Kickstarter to remake the sequence. He doesn't want much money. It's sort of literally the cost of the materials. So it's going to be launched in a few days, so please go and check it out and support it if you can. Peter is, of course, going to document the process as well as post the final results. So I'm looking forward to checking that out, and of course I'll post the link to Peter's Kickstarter in the show notes. So yeah, please go and support that if you can. Okay, so last episode you heard part one of my conversation with Nilo Rodis Jamero, design legend and wonderful person. For this episode, number 106, the 1st of July 2024, you'll be hearing part two of our chat. So when we left in part one, Nilo was talking about some of his work in the gaming industry. He goes on to talk about how he was always focused on inspiring and guiding the production teams there to craft original and iconic worlds. He's a real advocate for originality and imagination in design, rather than leaning on copying existing designs or, these days using AI to assist in those designs. Nilo shares his experience working with the legendary John Hughes, emphasizing the value of building relationships and understanding a director's vision. We also delve into the crucial role of production design in film, and also the kind of unspoken code of acceptance when a director gives their nod of approval for a set. Nilo believes that good design should shake the viewer to their core, as he says, creating a unique experience for the viewer. This means a lot of iterating and refining, but through this rigorous process, he hopes that truly groundbreaking concepts can emerge. Collaboration is another cornerstone of Nilo's philosophy. He believes that the creative process thrives on the participation of diverse talents, each contributing their own expertise to the project. And this collaborative spirit is what drives his his innovation. So you'll know if you listen to my chat with Nilo in 2021 and the last episode that he also has met a lot of key figures in the industries he's worked in. And in this chat, he talks about meeting influential figures like Hayao Miyazaki and Tezuka Osamu. These encounters have not only inspired him, but they've sort of provided valuable insights into his design and storytelling work. It's not all work for Nilo. There's a bit at the end of this episode where I remind him that I work for F1, and it's something that brings joy to his life. He does really enjoy motor racing. So we talk about that a little bit. And Nilo becomes the fan for the moment. It's quite fun, actually. So buckle up, as they say, and let's dive into the creative mind of Nilo Rodis Jamero. This episode is packed with his insights, his inspirations, and a lot of passion about the art of design. So here's my chat with Nilo, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on.
They were actually responsible for making sure that there was no overtime. They don't pay for overtime, and there is no union. I thought, okay, my career is over in games.
And what happened?
Nothing happened. There was another event that games at the time were really concerned about making sure that they were hiring movie people.
Yeah.
And I was one of those that they hired. I was the earliest one that they hired, or one of the early ones that they hired. So when the movie people started coming up, because I was bored, I did the history of FIFA.
Mm-hmm.
The history of FIFA game.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained that on such and such a year, this game, FIFA, came up. And if you look at the game, all you see is a stick figure, a black stick figure, and a flat, non-3D character walk around and kick this ball that is also square and moves that way. And that's the beginning of FIFA. And then I draw a line all the way to whatever year that was when I was there. And I said, this is where FIFA game is now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I showed was a freeze frame of the game. But what I also did, Jamie, was I did a freeze frame of a broadcast game, right? So I put that side by side because EA at that time was so concerned that all the games must look realistic, photorealistic. And I explained to them what I was attempting to explain to them, that we are already there.
Yeah.
We're already there. So what I did was I showed two still images. One was a game and one was a broadcast of FIFA.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them which one is our game and which one is FIFA. And they look at it and they look at it and they look at it. And they couldn't tell it apart. And so, during this meeting, they said, well, what's your point? And so my point is when I press play on the broadcast, look what's going on. And when I press play on the game, look what's going on. The game looks silly, but it is photorealistic. But when you watch all the players, they're not behaving like real people. So what I'm attempting to say to you guys is that we are already there visually. What we need is AI. What we need is all of these characters must behave as if they're moving realistically relative to the ball.
Yeah.
Right? And they said, the reason we hired you is because we like movie people to make our games more realistic. And I said, no, that's not the point to me. The point to me is you don't really need people like me. What you need is more AI. And this was, oh my God, Jamie, this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I presented this to one of the executives, and he said, have you shown this to anyone? And I said, no, not yet, because he came to my my workstation, and wanted to know what was going on, so I explained to him. So he said, don't show this to anyone. And he said, can you do me a favor, send me a copy? So I sent him a copy. Then I realized that somewhere down the line, he presented that that's his idea, and he just removed my name and presented that that's his idea. Wow. Another, you are more powerful if you're able to take somebody else's idea and elevate that person who had that idea. You are that much more powerful. But taking that idea that a foot soldier did and claiming it your own is not, to me, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it's reductive for everybody involved.
Elevate that person. Yeah. That makes you a much better executive, in my opinion. I'm going to go back to John Hughes. One day he asked me, I want you to hang out with Jackie Chan. And I wanted to, okay, John, why? I said, well, when we are done with this movie, and you having hung out with Jackie Chan for whatever, 3 months, 4 months, on another show another movie that Jackie Chan was working on, separate from our movie. By the time that show is done and we now pivot to our movie, Jackie and you now have a relationship. And I thought, what a brilliant concept that is. I mean, what a brilliant concept that is. A studio would never do that. Nilo, we're going to send you to Africa for 6 months and you hang out with this guy. And, by the time 6 months is done, we're ready for our show. You have that relationship cemented already. And John was like that. And that's very much kind of George Lucas' way of me making movies. So I was very at home with John because we're able to abstract our conversation. Unfortunately, like John was working on Captain Hook. He was working on the next 101 Dalmatian.
Yeah.
And in his version of 101 Dalmatian was completely CG dogs.
Right.
We follow the dogs. We don't follow the people at all. And I thought it was brilliant. And his idea of Captain Hook was brilliant. Set it on World War II, and Captain Hook is a German U-boat commander. And I go, I'm in. That's a great idea.
And I mean, ticks all the boxes, right? It's John Hughes as well. I mean, that's the thing, though. You look at John Hughes' career, and there's probably, 20 films that he either wrote or directed or produced, but there's probably twice as many that didn't get made. Projects, that were unrealized for one reason or another. Going all the way back. I think at one point he was linked to National Lampoon's Jaws 3 People Zero, which is going to be like a parody of the Jaws movie. And then I think like all the way up to there was going to be a Breakfast Club sequel, I think, in the early 2000s as well. But it's amazing that somebody with his clout and his, experience and his box office and his appeal is still unable to get these made. But that's just part of the process, isn't it, in many cases?
It's part of the process. What I've really learned was, when I was asked to team with John, it was because Disney was, John and Ricardo were getting into more and more expensive movies. If you go back to John Hughes' earlier movies, they were made for very little money. And and they were just brilliant writing and brilliant casting and brilliant music.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's who John is, and John incubates his idea away from the studio,
Yeah.
and John's idea of rewrite is there is no rewrite. That's what I immediately learned from John. The script that he submitted to the studio is the final script. There is no other rewrite.
Yeah, right.
So when John and Ricardo started making more and more expensive movies, Disney asked me to join them, and John was very accommodating.
Mm.
My first meeting with John was I was asked. I thought I was being interviewed for production design.
Mm.
So I went to Chicago, and John started talking about gardening and garden hoses specifically.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm occasionally looking at my watch because I'm to turn around and go back to San Francisco the same night. And John continues to talk about, and I'm sitting there with my portfolio, yeah. And he started talking about garden hoses and what you should avoid and the kind of garden hose you should buy because he was into gardening.
Right.
And then finally he noticed that I was checking my watch constantly, and he goes, "What time is your flight?" And I said 10 o'clock tonight. I said, you'll make it. There's plenty of time, So the end of the conversation, and he goes, "Well, have a good flight. We'll chat again." So I'm back on the car, and the phone rings, and it's my agent. I'm being shuttled back to the airport, and the agent goes, "How did it go?" And I said, it was a complete waste of my time. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why you sent me here. I don't know why you think I'm capable of doing what this is, because we never talk about design.
Mm.
And I went on on a rant. She allowed me to go on a rant for a while, and then finally she goes, "John loves you." I said, "What?" "Yeah, John wants you to produce his movie for him." I said, "What?" I said, "When did he call you?" I said, he just hung up. I called you right away. And I go, "What does he want me to do?" "I want to design this movie." He said, "No, you're not designing that movie. You're producing that movie for him." So that's how I run into John.
Wow.
I'm not, the same thing with the music thing.
Yeah.
He was, it's whatever, what I've learned was, it's not so much design, but your understanding of what it is that they're trying to do.
Mm.
Subsequently, when I interviewed for production design, when you walk into that studio, when I walk into a studio for a production meeting, usually, Jimmy, they send you the script the night before.
Mm.
And then the following morning, they want to see you.
Yeah.
They don't give you much time to decide what that script is. By the time I get there, I would see, oh my God, multiple Oscar winners in this studio waiting to be interviewed. I haven't got a prayer. I'm nobody. Look at these guys, and some of them have a model. Some of them, the night before, they made models. Yeah.
Wow.
Or they made sketches, or they made blueprints of this. So, and I realized that this interview is really anybody that's here is capable of taking on 20% of the production budget, is capable of managing his crew, is capable of designing movies. The only question is, are you in sync with us?
Yes.
Do you understand what we're attempting to do? That's all that's in question, because everybody that's there is capable and qualified. And usually when you take, when it's your turn and you sit down on the, in front of the producer or director, Jamie, the seat is so warm.
Yeah.
And you sit there and, you get on. What is, you know, um, usually no more than 3 minutes, it's over. 5 minutes, it's over. They just want to know, are you in sync with us? They just want to look at you in the eye and say, can we trust you? Do you understand what it is that we're trying to do? And usually I turn around and I fly back to San Francisco the same day, almost the same hour.
Mm.
Crazy.
But it's about creating those relationships, people finding that spark, isn't it? And understanding, as you said, what their vision is, rather than showing your skills in a model or in a sketch. It's really, they just want to know, are we on a level?
Are we on the same level?
Yeah.
And I used to worry about what is it that I'm going to show to them, and I realized that this meeting is really just everybody's qualified. Now it's just a question of, are you on the same level with us? And typically once you get that gig, the production design or whatever, my experience with good producers and directors, that's almost the last time you see of them. There are some meetings here and there, but they leave you alone.
Yeah.
It's you present ideas, you make quick models. Here's another thing that I really like about movie making. There's an unspoken code about production design and sets. The day of photography on that set, there's an unspoken code that the director would walk around to see the set, and then either agree or disagree, or we move on, can you fix this? And we move on to the other set. Oftentimes they look at the set and they go, yeah, right, okay, let's shoot. And you as a production designer sit there until they turn the camera around. When they turn the camera around, it means that they have accepted your set.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful unspoken code. So I usually have to sit there for however long it would take them to shoot the first scene. And once the camera moves, then unspoken code that it's been accepted.
Yeah. If you're waiting for a pat on the back, you're not going to get it.
No.
Yeah.
No.
You're waiting for that time for it to move on. One of the other things I was going to ask you about was working with Greg Jean on Star Trek 3, would that have been?
Yeah.
He was the model shop supervisor. So Greg recently passed away, and his entire collection of models and movie artifacts from across 50 years of film and TV was put to auction.
Yeah.
What do you think about these things that you've designed and have been made into models becoming these kind of holy grails for people? I mean, that X-Wing they found in his garage there, I think it went for like $3 million or something like that. Do you have a view on that kind of prop collecting world?
Yeah. I've read about that. Greg was a good friend. And I remember when I was doing my first Star Trek movie, I hang out with Greg because he was from LA. I'm not from LA. And he was that ultimate collector.
Yeah.
You probably have noted, I don't have any Star Wars anything with me. I don't have any Star Wars memorabilia with me at all.
Yeah.
I even the sketches, I don't have them because to me they were paid for by George. So everything goes there, right? And usually, every 2 weeks when George was there, all the artwork are collected, and they would just give us a Xerox copy of whatever artwork we had presented. But the original goes to archive. I remember going to his studio, and it's Greg is a ultimate collector. Of all the collectors I know, he had the most of everything.
Mm.
Yeah. I was recently asked, a couple of years ago, I was asked by Prop Store. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Mm.
Um, to would I be interested in doing some reimagining of Star Wars?
Yeah, I saw those. Yeah.
And I was very careful that they had the rights to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They assured me that they did, and I did some artwork, and they were very, very specific that Nilo, you need to date this to the day that you did this artwork, meaning don't predate it.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure will encapsulate all of these on the reimagining of Star Wars, and all of them had to be original. So I can't do them digitally. I have to do them on pen and paper. And I have to tell you, Jamie, just trying to get back to that world took me like a month or so just to get my head around how do you design this darn thing, and what music was I listening to when I was doing this,
Really?
just to recapture what it was,
Mm.
right? And just just even just how do I use pen and paper again? And there's no erasing. I used to draw everything. I used to design everything with ballpoint pen.
Mm.
So I had to recapture that ballpoint pen on paper, on this. But it was good fun in the end, then they auctioned it off, and it was good. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very careful that they had the right to do that.
Mm.
So yeah, no, I'm all I have is memories of all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I part of the issue, I guess, that I've got with people who have these huge collections, I guess Greg Jean included, is he just kept that all to himself. There was no look at this amazing work that's been done. I know museums are expensive to create, but maybe a donation to a museum or a loan to a museum. It seems crazy to me that there are these multi-millionaires with all of this stuff in their basements, in Greg's case, in boxes, in bin liners, in trash bags, just sitting there when it has a sort of to me, the cultural value is far greater than the monetary value.
Oh, I agree.
I'm not sure what it is about people needing to sort of hoard this stuff. Thank goodness he did in many cases, in Greg's case, because a lot of that stuff would have disappeared. But now, of course, it's spread throughout the world in multiple collections and probably will never see the light of day, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you think there's George is building this museum of narrative art in outside Los Angeles somewhere, isn't it? I think. I wonder if some of the archives, some of your work will appear there. I think it will.
Oh, very likely. When I watch movies nowadays, Jamie, I'm blown away by the technology. The technology we had was so archaic. I was lucky enough to be there during the transition from
like
what would you call
photochemical,
it?
Yeah.
So analog, yeah. And while I understand, some of the technology, and when I watch movies nowadays, especially when they try to explain how it was made, I always go, I wish they stopped doing that. Let me just enjoy the movie. I don't care how it was made. I don't care what the magic was. I just want to watch and enjoy the movie. I don't try and dissect the technical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I find that incredibly boring. The toolkit of a modern day filmmaker is so different now than it was.
Yeah.
Literally, the entire movie is pre-viz.
Yeah.
And they just take those little blocks of time and insert what they have shot in replacement.
Mm.
You know, the action sequences are there. The musical score is almost already there.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have those tools, when I was around. To even when I transitioned to EA, I was still doing ballpoint pen, and I would have to scan my ballpoint pen so that I can animate it. I remember doing a project where I had to animate this thing to convince EA this is a good idea to make into a game, but I didn't want the team to do it. I wanted to animate it myself. And the only way I could animate it was to draw it by hand on paper and then scan it and then, literally cut and paste it into animatable bits. And, it was a very crude but kind of charming, archaic way of presenting ideas. And I presented this to them, and it went on into production, but it was killed halfway through production.
Right.
So anyway, one of those things.
What is the game that you worked on that you think you're most proud of while you were at EA?
I wasn't really sure why EA wanted to hire me. They initially asked me to give a talk at EA here, and I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the city. And at that time, there was an offer on the table for me to design this game that was made in San Francisco, EA San Francisco, or EA Redwood Shore. But the idea of living in San Francisco and driving through traffic in San Francisco versus what I experienced here, and the one day that I was here, I thought, I'd take this. So, they asked me to give a talk. And after the talk, they asked if I'd be interested in doing something with them. And I told them, I honestly don't play games. I don't understand video games. And they said, don't worry about it. We're a company of 10,000 employees, and all of us know how to make games. We don't know what you do. So I was brought in and became corporate creative director and traveled all over the world because they have studios all over the world, and that's what I did for almost 7 years with them. But mostly I try to inspire them as to what the core idea is, and is the core idea ownable? Can we own it? Because EA is its own company, it's its own production company, it's its own distribution company. That means whatever they create, they own. But what they were doing was FIFA, that's not theirs. Yeah, they don't own that, they just license it.
Yeah.
NFL, they don't own that, they just license it. So what I really wanted to do was to create an iconic character, an iconic world that will be owned by EA. What I quickly understood at EA was I was good in shepherding production. The first production that they dropped me into was a very troubled production. They were not having fun. And I wanted to understand why they were not having fun, because I thought the idea behind it was really cool, and the visual cues that I saw was really cool. So I remember taking the producer aside. You seem very troubled. What is troubling you? Yeah, and I was there like a couple of days later, literally. He said, we're preventing from moving forward because of this one person. And this one person was, it was a studio that was recently acquired by EA. So the EA mechanism of how to do games, or the EA culture, was now all over this studio that had its own culture. I think they were burdened by the idea that they used to have their own culture, their own way of doing things, but now they had to do it the EA way. So there was an EA Uber producer on top of that, an EA production designer on top of that, this became a burden to the crew that was trying to deliver a game.
Mm.
So he intimated to me that there is this one person that seems to be blocking why they were not having fun. So I went to the CEO and I said, we should reward people and move them to a bigger production if their contribution to one game.
Mm.
Instead of putting them in that game forever, why don't we move them away from that game and put them into another game as a reward, so that people would see that if you do good, you'll be moved on to a bigger production. Because we have multiple games going at the same time, yeah. And, the CEO asked, where would you move him? And I said, well, move him to this game, because this game is a high-profile game, and it's based on a movie. And, he will enjoy that. And it's you don't have to pay him anymore, but it's a reward, right? And more importantly, the crew would understand that if you are able to do something, you're immediately rewarded by a bigger role. Not so much money, but role.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved this one person, and the crew went on to deliver this game, and they sold 20 million copies of this game at $50 a piece.
Wow.
So the game was a massive success. And they thought I had something to do with that success. No, I didn't have anything to do with that success. I merely asked to move one person to another game. That's all I did. They thought, what if we drop Nilo into these other studios? Would he be able to unblock those other? So that was my role. Literally, I had nothing to deliver. So probably that, even though I didn't deliver something that I did, that was very rewarding to me.
Yeah.
The game I really wanted to make ultimately was not made. So that was a big disappointment, but that's how it works.
But yeah, just being able to identify that you were integral to that, to that game moving forward. You did, like you say, you unblocked the pipe there.
I realized then, Jamie, that I have transitioned into becoming, because of my previous credit, they give me a leeway to steer productions into a certain direction. And, for a while, I was very uncomfortable that I was not sitting down and designing. And then I realized that what I really was ultimately asked to do was take my film experience and film production experience, and can I mirror that into game?
Yeah.
And I've always been fond of saying that producing games is like herding cats. They're so young, Jamie. And these are actually their first experience in creative / production. But unlike me and Joe and Ralph, they grew up with internet already in their world.
Yeah.
Right? And what I've experienced was that Joe and I would take, or Ralph especially, would take a sheet of paper and come up with idea using just a sheet of paper. We visualize what we had to visualize on our own. We didn't Google and say, what does this thing look like? And then literally take that, copy that, and paste it, and then paste that shoes over here and paste. And, I was shocked that games were made that way. How did you come up with this idea? I just Googled that, and I go, no, can you just take a clean sheet of paper and come up with an original idea?
And what do you think then about the next leap, which has happened in the time since we last spoke, really? AI has very much arrived on the scene, where people are not just Googling for things, they're suggesting to a machine learning tool what they want to see and combining it with something else. And this can be done by non-artists. This can be done with people who don't have imagination. What's your view on that stuff?
And you can tell that there's no imagination behind it, and there's no originality behind it, and everything is so generic. You know, the most important thing to me about design is, number one, does it shake me to the core? Does it make me go, wow, I like that design. I want that ship. I want that world. I want to be in that world. So when I see AI generated images, I go, I don't respond to it.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing behind it. You know, it's maybe in the next few years we're gonna get there, but not right now. So when I look at this, and you know, a friend of mine is he produces theater, and he showed me some design, and I go, these are really bad AI generated images. I said, yeah, it's, you know, I said, no, don't do that. You know, hire really good designers so that you know, I remember during Star Trek, you know, we were in New York, and we had a day off in New York. The executive producer, the producer, the production manager, and myself were in New York. And you know, that morning they said, "Hey, Nilo, what are you doing today?" And I said, "There is a show on Broadway called M Butterfly. I'm gonna go see it." And I said, "What is M Butterfly about?" And he said, "I don't know what it's about, but it's designed by Eiko Ishioka, and I want to see her design." Eiko Ishioka used to be creative director for Seibu. How do I explain Seibu? It's a store. It's a high-end store that is very elegant and into modern design.
Right. Yeah.
And they Eiko used to roam around the globe to shoot this commercial for them.
I recognize her name from Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't she work with Coppola? Yeah.
Yeah. And before that, she did a poster for Coppola of Apocalypse Now. And her design on Apocalypse Now for a poster made me want to go see that movie. And it's you know, and then she ended up production designing Mishima for Coppola.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
okay.
And I think she was nominated for an Oscar for that movie. And then she did Dracula, where she did costume design, and she won the Academy Award for costume design. So we were in New York, and you know, I know of Eiko's work because that's where I live. I live in design. The rest of them didn't have anything to do with me, so they came along with me to see this play. And Eiko's design is so wonderfully simple. The set, you know, when you go to a theater, you know, they have to move some stuff around to approximate the next set and the next set. Her set was only one from beginning to end, and nothing was moved.
Wow.
And yet it worked. Beautifully simple and amazing, you know. So one day, this is before I did Star Trek. One day I'm walking around at ILM, and I remember kind of, you know, joyfully sliding into the hallway, you know, where you run and you slide.
Yeah.
You know, because why not? And as I slid that way, here comes this incredibly, how do I explain it? Here comes Eiko, and everything in the world, Jamie, went out of focus except Eiko. You because she has a very striking presence.
Mm.
She's a tiny woman, but she has this presence.
Mm.
And I remember pointing at her, and I said, "You're Eiko Ishioka." And she started laughing like, "Yeah, that's me." We became kind of friends, not very close friends, and I used to visit her whenever I go to Japan.
Nice.
And I just worship her design. Her design is so iconic. Dracula, like that? Seriously?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dracula wearing that with that hair? What is that? Well, she owned it.
Yeah.
And Coppola's movie owned that. And that is the essence of good design to me.
Mm.
That it slaps you around and then makes you accept that is that world.
Mm-hmm.
There has always been an elegance about Dracula, but it was captured until Eiko captured it. And how did she capture it? By breaking all rules. By taking a sheet of clean paper and without any copying or taking a snapshot of that Google whatever to this to that, and you cobble up this borrowed stolen images, and don't do that, because you will not come up with any good, ownable, iconic design, because you never really worked to get that. All you did was pastiche up a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you're training yourself. That's not design. That's simply not design to me.
Yeah, it's just amalgamation of things, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It is, and it's a bad amalgamation of all of that, because you've seen all of that. In my head, I go, I've seen that before, I've seen that before, I've seen this before. And all of them put together is very uncomfortable looking, because they don't belong to each other. They don't belong to any coherent world.
Yeah.
So I remember when the first time I went to London, we had this big meeting, and I didn't know how important this meeting was. There was everybody presenting the game that was all their games. All the studios was there to present ideas of the upcoming game that year. And I was invited to come there. And, a couple of days after I arrived in London, I had massive jet lag. I could not keep myself awake that day. And during the presentation, I'm dozing off the back of the stadium or this big meeting hall, and I'm falling asleep. And they were presenting this game. During presentation, the CEO of the company raised his hand and he said, "Can I drive in this world?" In other words, can the gamers actually run around and drive in this world?
Right.
And the producer of this game said, "No, you can't. No, you can't." And the CEO of the company pushed himself away from the desk that he was sitting, or this table that he was, spun around, and like a petulant child, folded his arm and frowned and made eye contact with me. And he goes, "Nilo." And everybody now, I was new. Everybody now look at me like, "Who is Nilo?" I said, "Nilo, why don't you step up to the stage and present your idea?" And I go, "Present what idea?" And I said, "The idea of the game that you presented to me a couple of days ago." And I said, "Sorry, I don't have my presentation with me." He said, "Just wing it." Now the big room is now awfully quiet. It's just the two of us now. He comes over to me and he said, "Come on, just present it." I said, "No, I can't. I don't have my presentation with me." And he said, "No, just go ahead." And he's literally grabbing my coat to drag me there. And I said, "This today's venue is about games that we're about to release this year. This is not about upcoming games."
Yeah.
So he sat down, and now he was twice as petulant as ever. and the presentation kind of crashed and burned,
Hmm.
you know. And I didn't know how powerful this person was. He he actually founded EA,
Right.
and I mean, he is the guy who owned this company. So the presentation was finished, and everybody from all over the world had presented their idea, and they started streaming out. And there was one guy who came over to me, and he said, "Hi." He introduced himself to me. He shook my hands, and he said, "You are so fucked." He walked away. Evidently, no one is supposed to say no to this guy,
Right.
and I just did it public. So, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm toast." I haven't been here but a few weeks, and now I've lost my job. So that evening, very frosty, chilly dinner. No one was talking during dinner. He's still pissed off, and he said to me, "You're going to the studio tomorrow, and you're gonna give me a report as to what that game about your opinion as to that game." you know. So I thought, I guess I still have my job until tomorrow anyway. So I go to that studio, and they presented this concept game that I'd never seen before,
Mm.
and it's called Rhythmomatic. What the So you have a game title, yeah,
Mm.
and this is a shooting game, first-person shooting game. Their idea of presenting it is to present a basic story.
Mm.
Like, to me, games don't have story. You imagine what the story is, but there's never really a story, because game is a different animal than movie. So the first presentation to me was bits and pieces of movies that they have cut and pasted and color corrected so that they're all in the same color. They don't jump around. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then smooth over by music and sound design.
Mm-hmm.
So the first image they showed me was of an actor.
Mm.
I can't come up with his name. Let's say Brad Pitt, right? And this character is Brad Pitt. Will be played by this guy, Brad Pitt, and then he goes to this world, and he's a assassin, and so on and so on and so on. And I immediately raised my hand. I said, "Do you have Brad Pitt?"
Mm.
And they said, "No, we're gonna license his image, for this game." And I said, the problem with that is that, you're assuming that the people will come in because you have Brad Pitt's face.
Mm.
But what you don't have is the craftsmanship that Brad Pitt actually have. I said, no, but we have good animators. And I said, no, you have animators. I don't know how good they are, but they are not Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, stop with this Brad Pitt idea. Just pitch me the idea that it's this character, right?
Yeah.
Don't give me faces. Now make me believe that this character does this in this world. And I told them, this diplomatic business, to me it doesn't work because you don't have that in the end.
Mm.
Actually, all you have is a gun in front of a first-person shooter, and you're shooting this thing. And the beauty of your game is that everything blows up. Everything that I can aim blows up. Okay, I get that. But don't pitch me the idea that you have Brad Pitt and you have Brad Pitt's craftsmanship to go along with it, because you don't. So I started writing this report, and I remember one of the executives, Jimmy, came to me, and I said, "Hey, what are you working on?" I said, "I'm writing this report for Don." And he said, "Hey, can I take a peek at it?" And he said, I showed him what I'd written, in my computer, and I said, "Oh my God, don't send this." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, this is the entire process of how games are made here.
Mm.
And I said, this process is completely wrong because it promises you the idea that you have the craftsmanship that Brad Pitt brings along in the movie. You have his charm, you have his wink of the eye, you have his smile. You don't. That's owned by Brad Pitt. What you just have is a static face.
Yeah.
You know. And he said, no, don't send this to, you know. And he turns around, walks away. I press send.
Yeah.
Because it's my job.
Yeah.
Fire me. You ask me for my opinion, and if I don't give you my opinion, then what is my job?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So, you know, whenever I send an email to the CEO, there's a bunch of CCs, right?
Yeah.
And I CC'd this other guy who told me not to send it. And the response came from the CEO was, right on, brother.
Huh.
And he was the first guy to say, I told Nilo to send that to you. So,
yeah.
What I've learned, Jamie, is that to design properly, you have to be very honest.
Mm.
You know, I used to remember that Joe and I had this saying that the first design iteration, the first 100 design iteration that we both have are copies of ideas that we have seen before. And they are not to be seen by anyone. Joe would never send me his first iteration, nor do I show Joe my first iteration. It's just for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what I've learned is that, you know, you struggle for the first 100 design, 98 design, 99 design, 100, 120, and then you finally run out of ideas. And then you start coughing up blood. Because what I've learned, Jamie, is that by putting it on paper and exercise all of these stupid design ideas that I've seen, I've exercised it out of my head. But if I don't put them down on paper, they will always exist in my head. So I put them down on paper, and then once I put them down on paper, it's gone forever. But now I don't have anything. I don't have anything. And I literally, to me, you start coughing up blood, and then original design starts to emerge from there.
Mm.
You know, Boba Fett's ship came up like that.
Mm. Sort of like a filtration process, isn't it? Just kind of filtering out all the bad ideas to get to the good one.
I think it's a good idea. But once I put it down on paper, I realize it's a copy of an idea that I've already seen. It's a copy of that. It's a copy of this. It's a variation of that. Until finally I run out of variation, and I go, okay, now what? You know, and that's when original ideas start to come in. And what I was trying to explain to these kids that I was working with at the EA is, unless you go to that process, your design will always be something else that has been seen before. I feel that you have shorted your role as a designer. Because your role as a designer is not to copy anything, it's to come up with something new. So when I look at Ralph McQuarrie's idea, Ralph's idea simultaneously look new and look comfortably old at the same time. And it's a function of who he is, or who he was. You know, he came from that era. So the era of design, my design is based on how do I manufacture this? How would one manufacture this? You know, George has this word for details. He calls it gribbly or greedly. You know, and people always think that the design, you have to have a lot of gribblies to be successful design in Star Wars. No, you don't. No, you need an iconic design, and then the Ghibli comes along. The Ghibli, let Lorne Peterson deal with that, because he is more comfortable. He's in that world more than I am. I'll give him the specific or the basic idea of what this is, and then leave him alone to he knows that better than I do. And to me, that is their participation. If I go there and I say it looks like this, and this corner looks like that, and this detail looks like, and if you take a microscope, the detail goes like this, you will choke them to death.
Yeah.
And they have no sense of participation of what is intended to be done. Much like George allowed me and Ralph and Joe participation, we allowed model makers to do that, and it frees us to go do something else.
Makes sense.
And if I've only learned one thing, it is that.
Mm.
And then that was amplified in movies, because in movies, as a production designer, I don't comment about the hair. I don't comment about the costume. I don't comment about the lighting. I have other problems in mind.
Yeah.
It's not them.
I think that's probably a perfect place to finish it. But I did have one other thing that I wanted to ask you about. I'm not really sure it's a question, but I understand Hayao Miyazaki is also inspiration to you.
Yes.
Is that somebody whose designs kind of fit what you've just been talking about in terms of, creating something new, but also iconic, and something that looks sort of simultaneously old and new and refreshing? Because I look at some of those movies that he made throughout his career, and they look like nothing else. And there's a simplicity to their design that absolutely captivates my kids and me.
Yes. I have a very long story about Hayao Miyazaki. You could actually make an episode of it. Anyway, it goes something like this. This is a short version. A friend of mine told me that Tezuka-san was somewhere in the United States,
mm-hmm.
was visiting United States and Japan. And I shrug my shoulder and I go, okay, I don't know who Tezuka is. So she explained to me that Tezuka started animation in Japan a long time ago, and that he was somewhere in the States giving a talk, and she said, it would behoove me to find where he is, and wherever he is, go sit on his meeting, go sit on his presentation.
Mm.
So because she was a good friend, I asked my assistant, can you find where Mr. Tezuka is in the States right now?
Mm-hmm.
My assistant found out that Mr. Tezuka was giving a talk in Sacramento.
Mm.
And I asked, can you ask him to come over to ILM as our guest?
Mm.
So that I can call my friend and said, I have done what you have asked, and we're still friends, right? Because, whenever you ask me to go, hey, Nilo, go see this, I'm bound to have to go see it because you're a friend, right? So I invited Mr. Tezuka to come over, Osamu Tezuka. He did Astro Boy.
Yes. He
did Simba the White Lion,
mm-hmm.
right? Did I tell you this story?
No, you didn't. No.
So Mr. Tezuka came to the studio at ILM, and we have a photographer at ILM, and I asked him, can you shadow him and shoot pictures of him everywhere? So Mr. Tezuka came over, and we had a long chat. We had a nice lunch, and at the end, he presented me with some cells of Astro Boy.
Mm-hmm.
Original cells from Astro Boy.
Wow, really?
And really?
Huh.
A stack of this, Jamie.
Wow. And that was from like the 50s and 60s, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And so he presented another package with bows in it and, very Japanese packaging. Yeah. I said, this is for George's son, for Lucas' son. And I go, yeah, I'll hand it over to George. So he said, why don't you come over to my talk tonight? I'll be talking in Sacramento. So I thought, I'll go to your talk. And to make me comfortable, I drag along a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And during this talk, I sat in the audience, and then when it was done, I got up to leave, and Tezuka's assistant came over, and he said, Mr. Tezuka would like you to attend a party tonight. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. And so attended the party, very uncomfortable. I'm one of the few that don't speak Japanese in this party. And I thought, I need to excuse myself. I need to go home. It's now past midnight. I have to drive home. And so I wanted to say my goodbye. And the assistant said, no, you can't leave. Mr. Tezuka, I want you to stay because he wants to talk to you.
Mm.
3:00 in the morning, finally my turn came up. And he said, so what are you working on? And I thought, what an odd question, Jamie. So I said, I have this idea. Actually, I didn't have any idea. I just started rambling about an idea. And he said, what would you like to do with that idea? And I said, well, I'm thinking about a TV series. I'm just riffing. And he said, do you have financing in place? I said, no, I don't have financing in place. I said, do you have a studio in place? I said, I don't have a studio in place. I said, tell you what, I'll be the studio and I'll finance it.
Huh.
So,
wow.
Morning came. The following day, car pulls up. It's George. I said, Tezuka-san was here yesterday? And I said, yes. You didn't call me? And I said, should I have? I said, do you have any idea who Mr. Tezuka is? And he goes, actually, I didn't know until yesterday, George. And, George was making faces like, I can't believe you just did this. So what did you guys talk about? And he said, well, I pitched him this idea. And I said, what idea? So I have this idea, and George goes, can you pitch that to me? And I thought, I would never in a million years pitch an idea to George. This is his movie company. The idea comes from him, not from me. I'm just the guy that's called this ogre. Well, he designed this big church, and I'm designing this ogre that's the details of his church. That's all I'm doing.
Mm.
So he said, what did you get out of it? So I pitched him the idea, and George goes, I'll finance it. And I go, what? I'll finance it. So I asked the guy that I brought with me, because I really like him, and he really knows movies. I don't know movies, but this guy, his name is Phil Norwood. He knows movies. And I also brought in Eric to pitch the idea to George. Eric Luke wrote The Explorers.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So I called up Eric and said, I have this idea for, and can you come over and pitch this idea for me? And Eric flew over, and the following day, we marched over to George and pitched him the idea, and George goes, okay, what do you guys have in mind? I said, well, I need to go to Japan. George goes, what? I need to go. I said, he raised his hand and said, hey, whatever your process is, go for it. So I asked Eric, what would make you write this series for me?
Mm.
And I asked Phil, what would it take for you to direct this series for me? And both of them said, introduce us to Miyazaki.
Huh.
And I go, who is Miyazaki? So So both of them, you know, like George goes, I can't believe you don't know Miyazaki. So both of them schooled me, watch this movie. So a week later, the three of us went to Japan because I promised that they will meet Miyazaki. Unless they meet Miyazaki, they were not going to get involved in this production. Or, my idea of production, right? So that friend who asked me to go see Mr. Tezuka, her name is Michiko.
Mm-hmm.
Michiko, I don't know why Michiko has immense contact in Japan.
Mm.
I was able to meet Mr. Tamiya.
Really?
Because of Michiko.
Huh.
And, I love Formula One. And I know that Mr. Tamiya has the best collection of Formula Ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see him. And literally sat on Formula One car, in his office, in this big building. And Michiko also introduced me to Bridgestone, the Bridgestone tire company.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to Sony. She introduced me to Sony. She is so connected. So I told Michiko, we are here because these two guys, Eric and Phil, wanted to meet Mr. Miyazaki. Do you think you can arrange a meeting, the three of us with Miyazaki? And she, how much time do I have? I said, a week, And so we're walking around Tokyo like tourists, and day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and it's becoming clear to Eric and Phil that there is not going to be a meeting with Miyazaki. We're just blowing time in Tokyo, and I've pretty much given up, Jamie, that this is going to happen. So we were out gallivanting around Tokyo like tourists, and then one afternoon I called up Michiko, and Michiko said, "Hey, good news, Mr. Miyazaki would like to see you."
No way.
But here's the deal: he only wants to see you guys for 15 minutes,
Right.
no more. So Michiko said to take this train to this station and then this address, and I'll meet you there, and we'll go see Mr. Miyazaki. So I explained to Eric and Phil that, guys, don't waste any time. Don't ask for more time. We are there for 15 minutes, in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And they agreed. This was Sunday, and we knocked on this big studio door, and an assistant came in and ushered us to the waiting room, and walks in Miyazaki in a very foul mood because he was asked by Mr. Bridgestone to come and see us. Not by Michiko, Mr. Bridgestone. Michiko called Bridgestone, "Can you call Miyazaki?"
Wow.
Because that's how it works.
Yeah. Connections upon connections. Yeah.
You don't walk in the bottom floor. Yeah. So he was obliged to see us, and you could tell that he was not happy. I could tell.
Mm.
He's not happy to see us. He just wants to blow this meeting off. So I said to the guys, 15 minutes in and out.
Mm-hmm.
I reminded them. 2 hours later, we're still there having tea and cookies with Mr. Miyazaki.
No way. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and when we walked out, he gifted Eric a complete Bible and shooting storyboard of Laputa.
No way.
Have you seen that?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Castle in the Sky.
Because he was working on Laputa. Yeah, he was working on that at the time, and I'm hands off. I don't know this guy.
Mm.
The two of them were talking to Mr. Miyazaki, and I'm politely outside that conversation. And once we were done, we said goodbye. And as a parting thought, I asked Mr. Miyazaki, have you ever thought of doing a live action movie?
Mm.
And this kind of stopped him on his track. And he thought about it for a second, Jamie, and he goes, why?
Hmm.
And why indeed?
Yeah, absolutely.
What for?
Yeah.
To be troubled by studios? And no, this is his medium, and he's good at it. And on my way home, Michiko introduced me to another person that she told me that you have to be you have to be nice to this person.
Mm.
Okay, so I sat down, have a coffee with this person, and this person was with Japan Airlines, and she was asking me, why I was there, and I said, I'm here. I was here to meet the two giants. And she goes, who would that be? And said, Mr. Tezuka and Mr. Miyazaki. Because the day we arrived, Mr. Tezuka was our host.
Mm-hmm.
And the last day we were there, or the day before our last day, we were able to see Mr. Miyazaki. So, I told her that I was visiting the land of two giants. And she goes, would you like to write about that we can then publish for those little magazines that they have in Japan Airlines or any airline.
Yeah.
There's a bit of article. It's very light. It's nothing heavy. So I wrote for Japan Airlines about In the Land of Two Giants.
Nice.
That was it.
Incredible.
So, long roundabout way of Mr. Miyazaki.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
And
have you still got the article somewhere?
Somewhere.
I'd like to hear that. I mean, you just told me the story, but I'd love to see what you actually wrote. Amazing.
Anyway, Mr. Miyazaki.
There you go. Bloody hell, Nilo, we could. Oh my God, look at the time. We've been talking for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I feel like we could do another 3.
Well, you're gonna have to edit the hell out of it.
I know. I know. It's still going to be 2 episodes, I think. Amazing. My goodness me. Do you know, I have to come out and buy you dinner someday in Vancouver and chat some more, because I love chatting to you, man. It's been such great fun.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be really nice. Well, let's stay in touch for sure. Let's keep chatting, and I do get around, as you know, and we still haven't even talked about Formula One. I've worked in Formula One for 25 years.
No way!
Yeah.
No way! No way!
Yeah.
How so?
I work in the.
How so, Jamie?
I work in the television production side. So in the year 2000, I, by chance, got a job working for a company that provided technicians and editors and things to Formula One TV. And
no way.
Yeah, this is my 25th year working for them, because 2003 I didn't work for them at all because the company I worked for lost the contract. But yeah, this is my 25th season I'm in the middle of now. I've traveled the world for 20 years on Formula One.
No way. Oh my God. Wow.
And then COVID happened, and now I do my job remotely from southeast London, where I live. Just up the road, there's a little airport called Biggin Hill. It's an old RAF airport, and that's where Formula One are based. So that's where I am now. So instead of going to Australia and Singapore and Japan and India and Turkey and all those places, I get to go to Biggin Hill. But yeah, I mean, 20 years traveling is just incredible. And it's been more than half my life, Formula One.
Oh, how awesome is that?
I know.
I have a stupid smile in my face listening to you. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
wow.
As a kid, I lived in this little village called Greenhithe in Kent, which is not far from the River Thames. where the Dartford Tunnel is. I don't know if you remember that when you were over here, but my dad was into motor racing. He still is, actually, still watches motor racing. And we used to watch the Grand Prix. Like, if the British Grand Prix was on TV, my dad would, before the race would start, my dad would take me to the front door of our house and open the door, and we could hear the engines revving from Brands Hatch, the famous British Grand Prix circuit.
Wow!
And I remember hearing them pull away before they pulled away on the TV, because obviously the TV was on a slight delay. And then my dad knew that the guy who controlled the barrier, the security barrier, would lift the barrier at about lap 20. And we could drive up there and just drive straight into the Grand Prix for free. Yeah.
Nice.
So I think I was probably like 4 years old the first time that happened. So Formula One has kind of been there all my life, because I had the cars, I had the little cars, I had the Tamiya, I raced Tamiya cars as well. Tamiya. And I made the models and things. And then, as a 23, 24-year-old, I got that job working for Bernie Ecclestone. Yeah.
How cool is that?
I know. I feel really super lucky. I mean, but I haven't got any Miyazaki stories. Well, I did meet George Lucas, though.
No,
I did meet George at Silverstone.
Nice.
Yeah.
When was that?
2016, 2017, maybe. I was walking down the paddock at Silverstone one afternoon. I think it was qualifying day, Saturday. And I was like, that's George Lucas over there. And I'd seen he'd been at several other races over the years, but I was always indoors working whenever I saw him, because it was live. And I thought, I'm going to have to go and say something to him. So I just went and spoke to him and said what a huge inspiration he'd been. The thing that, a million people have said to him. And then I asked him about motor racing, and then he lit up, then he wanted to talk about what I did and why he was there and what team he was supporting. And he didn't want to talk about movies. Yeah. He wanted to talk about cars.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I used to crew for him.
You used to what?
Because he had I would crew for him whenever he raced. He used to race over there's a circuit in near us in Marin County. I forgot the name.
Is it Sonoma?
Sonoma.
Yeah.
Sonoma.
Yeah.
And he used to race there with I don't know what formula that is. It's not an open wheel car. But he's a great racing fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I noticed that a lot of the posters in the ranch are there's a lot of motor racing movies that he's got posters of in that amazing poster collection of his that's displayed all around the ranch.
Yeah. Amazing. I didn't know that you were into Formula One as well.
Well, do you know what? Actually, I found the original email that connected us today, and it was Mark Berman, who interviewed you a few years ago for the BBC.
Yes.
And he suggested that we talk. And in that email, he mentioned that I work for Formula One, and you said something like, anyone who works in Formula One is a friend of mine, or something like that. So we should have a proper chat about that someday. Just non-recorded conversation.
Yeah. No, okay. A quick Formula One. I used to time my vacation for the Long Beach Grand Prix when it used to be Formula One. And one day, and I would just buy a regular ticket. Yeah. And then one day, I managed to scrape my way into the paddock.
Oh, did you?
And that time it was Mario Andretti, Jackie Stewart, and Niki Lauda, and they were talking with one of my favorite designer of all time, Gordon Murray. He designed. He was
Brabham, McLaren. Yeah.
And yes. So I'm standing there with my what do you call that? Schedule for the day. There's a little pamphlet that you and a pen. And they were talking, and I gave them some space, but clearly I was there as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackie Stewart turned to me and he said, "Hang on a second," And I said, "Yes." And then finally they turned to me, and Jackie wanted to reach for my pen.
Mm.
And I said, "No, I want Gordon Murray to sign this." And they were all the drivers, Nicky Lauda, they were like stunned, like, what? And I became Gordon Murray's guest for the duration of Long Beach Grand Prix that year.
No way. How cool is that? Oh, that's
Yes.
very cool.
Yes.
Wow.
And I told them I'm designing military tanks, and said, well, it's the same thing. It's a very singular purpose.
Yeah.
I designed fast cars. Wow. A lot to talk about, Jamie.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. Thanks so much for doing this again, Nilo. I really appreciate it. But yeah, let's catch up over dinner or something at some point, and in person. It would be really great to meet you. But I'll leave you to the rest of your day now.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. Speak to you soon.
Okay.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nilo there. Love that guy, really do. And I really do hope I get out to Vancouver at some point and meet him in person. Up next, there is a bonus episode of the podcast with Kelly Knox, one of the authors of the recently released Return of the Jedi Visual Archive, the book by Insight Editions. Patrons have already seen and heard this because I uploaded a patrons-only video version of that interview a few weeks ago, but you get to have a listen to that now. Then for the second episode of this month, July 2024, I have Steve Sansweet as my guest. Now, most likely you know who Steve is, but if you don't, he's the curator of the world's biggest Star Wars collection. He was also the chief of fan relations at Lucasfilm for many years, and he was responsible for the creation of Star Wars Celebration many years ago and many things over the years. On recently visiting his Rancho Obi-Wan in Petaluma, California, I got in touch and we had a great chat, so look out for that in the latter part of July. Please support the podcast if you can via patreon.com/Jamie Benning. You can get an ad-free version of the podcast, exclusive video versions, and even some merch, depending on the tier you choose. And I really do need your help to continue making this. Without you, this podcast doesn't exist, and that would be a sad day. So yeah, if you can support the podcast, $12 and that would help for 1 year. That would be amazing if you could contribute that. $12. I mean, these days, what's that? 2 coffees, if you're lucky. Pint of beer in London. Yeah, so I really need that help, so please do check out the Patreon page. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.